I'm Scott Wallace. When firefighters broke down the health club's front door, they found enough flammable liquid to burn down the whole block. Arson experts say that if firemen had arrived just a few minutes later, the whole complex could have gone up.
Had it burned the way that it was intended to, when our firefighters made entry, broke down the door to get in there and fight the fire, the oxygen that would be supplied from the small area could have caused what the firefighters call a backdraft, which is essentially an explosion involving that flammable vapor. And enough was brought in to burn in this case for us to have a major fire of a magnitude that we're not familiar with here in the city.
Cooksey is quick to point out that neither the hotel nor the mall were negligent in this morning's blaze. In fact, he says his department has given some special training to hotel employees to teach them exactly what to do in case a bad blaze ever does break out. Scott Wallace, Action 4, downtown Oklahoma City.
The state employees' raises were to be based upon a study called the Hayes Report, which upgraded job titles and descriptions for all state employees to keep them more closely in line with private enterprise. Hopefully, so many employees wouldn't be quitting their jobs to seek employment elsewhere. But many employees don't like their new job titles and the pay that went along with it.
We have people that's 14, 15, 18 years experience. They've been reduced to lower grades. And to get them up to the level that they are right now would take 3 to 4 more years. So you can't do that with experienced people.
Well, it's a big farce. To me, it's the dumbest thing they ever came up with.
What it has caused is a lot of people are now at the top of the allowable salary range for their classification, which means they have no future until they get promoted to a higher classification.
Representative Cleta Deatherage had anticipated the employees' concern. She wanted to delay implementation of the study until lawmakers could study it further.
I, quite honestly, have had serious misgivings about implementing this program this quickly and had recommended, as the Speaker also recommended at certain points during the session, why don't we delay implementing this for a year and just give an across-the-board pay raise this year, and then we'll have time to work through all these problems. But the governor was pretty insistent and that this was his top priority, and if we didn't do it now, we never would. So, we've agreed to do that, and now we'll just have to work through the problems.
Mind you that.
Come on, Channel 4.
Like most Americans, these construction workers put in 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. They live off their wages now and probably expect to live off of Social Security when they're no longer able to work. However, most financial advisors say that's not a very solid retirement plan.
What advice can you give a young couple in their 20s that says we just don't have any money to invest?
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, I think I might mention to them that we're scheduled to have some tax cuts next year, and their overall tax liability may be cut as much as 10%. Make the effort. That money's not going to be withheld from your check. You're going to be getting more cash. Make the effort to set aside that 10%, and if you need to, for the time being, until you can accumulate some funds for a down payment on a house or to buy some stocks, whatever, accumulate that in a savings account so that it is earning some money during a time frame, and maybe a year, 2 years later, that savings account is built up where now you have sufficient funds that you can make a down payment on a house. You may be able to buy some stock. You may be able to put it into a larger, some of the higher rate savings accounts and things like that, so it starts earning for you.
Still, some people believe while they're on the job at work, Social Security is looking out for their future. Maybe, maybe not. Better to be safe and begin investing and saving on your own now. Larry Audis, Action 4.
It had to be a success if you're judging by the remains, because today the 40-acre site was littered with beer containers that went for $8 apiece. Promoters aren't quite sure how many people showed up. They're guessing at between 15 to 25,000. But if you could just count plastic jugs, the figure would probably go a little higher. But picking up the mess was pure pleasure to the people who fought so long to put an all-star country music cast into Norman Field, because they're laughing all the way to the bank.
The crowd was very controllable, very mild. Problems, we had 2 people who had medical problems. One wanted to relax for a while, and one came back to the concert. With the security officers that we hired, there was no problems. It was a very calm crowd, it was really a unique crowd. They enjoyed the music, they had a good time, they drank a little beer. A few drank too much beer, but all in all, it went over real well.
Since they had to buy the land, Shaver says they now have some property they hadn't counted on possessing. So there's no reason not to go ahead and do the same thing again. Sometime around Labor Day, he thinks. Ted Brown, Action 4 in Norman.
David Dedman has been putting in a lot of hours this summer. He's visited hundreds of homes, and he's seen thousands of insects. David works for Graham Pest Control, a company that's been in the Oklahoma City area several years. On the job, David uses several kinds of chemicals to kill pests. Now, pardon the pun, but pests do their best to destroy beautiful trees, shrubs, and lawns. But he doesn't use the chemical malathion. Now, that's the chemical that's causing all the ruckus out in California. His boss, Paul Sterling, says it isn't because the company feels it's harmful. In fact, Sterling says it's because it isn't effective enough.
Malathion is one of the older chemicals that we have had in the pesticide field for about 25 years, and it is considered one of the safest, if not the safest, product for the general public and as well as for professional sprayers such as ourselves.
Paul, why do you feel there's so much concern about the use of malathion in California?
The main concern of the people there now is that they're going to be spraying over several cities, and when you do this, you're creating a problem for possibly that they don't understand. And if it was the farmers only, there would be no problem whatsoever. They would go about their business, and the city dwellers would not be affected at all.
Sterling says the only problem he sees is that city dwellers in California may get their cars spotted by the chemical. However, environmentalists and a judge in that state aren't satisfied the chemical is safe. And although Sterling's company doesn't use malathion, he says homeowners across the Sooner State use it all the time. Ben McCain, Action 4.
thing that's precipitated this is that we've had 2 swimming pool deaths so far summer, and we don't have enough people to do the routine inspections on the frequency we'd like to. So we mobilized a number of our people from other areas, pulling them off other programs to put more emphasis on this program.
18 city sanitarians began inspecting area pools today. The health experts will be checking 2 basic areas: water cleanliness and pool safety. City pools must adhere to certain safety features. They must have ropes to show swimmers where the shallow water ends and the deep end begins. Owners must post signs listing pool rules and important numbers to call in case of emergency. Water depth must be clearly marked every few feet, and the city believes good fences around pools make for good neighbors. The health department says it will get tough with pool owners who operate unsafe pools. Inspectors will give offenders 2 weeks to shape up or close down. Scott Wallace, Action 4, Northeast Oklahoma City.
You know, if I was a stockholder in this Conoco oil well, a few weeks ago I wouldn't have had anything to worry about. The stock was only selling for about $55 a share, and then a Canadian oil company came along and offered $10 more than that. Well, now I've got a lot to worry about because it seems like just about everybody is after Conoco stock. And that leaves Conoco investors with some questions to be answered, mostly about who is trying to take over the company and why they would want the multinational oil giant to begin with. The answers to those questions determine whether or not they should take advantage of the inflated prices being offered for their shares.
If the offer being made by Seagram is deficient, materially deficient in its level of disclosures to the Oklahoma investor as to the many factors, the intentions of management, the policies they will follow, and so forth, as well as to the terms of the offer, the price to be paid, when a person has to submit it, so forth and so on. If Seagram's does not amend it to provide that disclosure to the investor, then the courts in Oklahoma, the district court, the trial level court, and ultimately the Supreme Court, would have the jurisdiction to stop this obvious failure of disclosure upon the Oklahoma investor.
A lot of people wonder how Conoco can be taken over when they don't want to be. Compared to some of the ins and outs of the financial world, that's a relatively easy question to answer. Conoco stock is public stock. It's available to anyone with the money to buy it on the exchange, including companies like Seagram's or Mobil, or for that matter, you or me. All it takes, as usual, is the cash to do it. Ted Brown, Action 4.
Last January, a California company bought the Tiffany House Apartments off Northwest Expressway and said extensive remodeling would begin. But now the summer heat has driven apartment dwellers outside to their balconies. Residents say these old water-cooled air conditioners are not doing their job. Kathy Morgan and other residents say they don't especially look forward to coming home. The air conditioning does not work. The apartments are hot, sticky, and uncomfortable. Morgan says she's complained, but it has not done any good. So she's put in her own air conditioner.
Well, it's been going on for a long time. This summer has probably been the worst. You know, like they'll get it fixed 2 days, and then it might go off 4 or 5. And it has been mostly off. That's the reason I put in the unit, because I can't stand the heat.
Glad to see this number of people here tonight with us.
A lobby full of unhappy residents met tonight to see if a united effort would get some response. Forming a tenants association was discussed. It so happens today the air conditioning worked, although somewhat ineffectively. But some of the residents want some kind of financial compensation for sweating it out until now.
And what I'd like to do is get a consensus from the people here that are to the effect that we are going to require that they answer. Either they make a concession in the rent retroactive to the time we didn't have any air conditioning, or just what they're going to do, what action they're going to do.
The apartment manager was not available tonight, but Action 4 talked with a Tulsa spokesperson for the management company. She says the units are old and need work. $34,000 has already been spent to fix the units. But until that work is finalized, residents at Tiffany House are just going to have to make do. Larry Audis, Action 4 on the northwest side.
Gates all over the city are locked. The only people allowed inside the swimming pool area are maintenance workers. At one time, cleaning the pool was just a routine matter, but now the future of the pool could be at stake. If the pools aren't cleaned up and chlorinated properly, the city-county health department may shut them down for good. Once all the changes have been made, the pools will have to be re-inspected.
Health inspectors shut down pools at motels. At the Hilton Inn, 4 swimming pools were shut down, all for fencing violations. The motel residents are upset, and so are the tenants at apartment complexes.
Come out right in the middle of a budgeted year and not do it at a better time, it's just a little bit unfair. And then to try to put all the blame right on the homeowners' heads.
I don't see why they have to come in now in the middle of the whole summer and close them down. Why couldn't they have done it before? You know, it's hot out here.
I just think they needed a little camera work and needed some publicity this year, and they just wanted to come out and get it in the middle of the summer.
Meantime, people at a number of apartments are busy painting numbers on sidewalks and doing all the other things they were supposedly negligent in doing. Here it is, mid-July, in the heat of summer, and a lot of people just don't understand why such a crackdown began now. Bella Shaw, Action 4 in northwest Oklahoma City. In northwest Oklahoma City.
Hundreds of jumpers like this one have been dropping into Muskogee this month. Spiraling down beneath a colorful canopy, the athletes are competing in the World Series of sport parachuting.
Let's go! Set, go!
No, these skydivers aren't performing a rain dance, they're dirt diving. That's a parachute term for jumpers' ground practice. These shooters will dirt dive a dozen times before boarding their jump plane.
Ta-da!
The first part of the jump is waiting for the plane to get ready. Heavy cotton jumpsuits become ovens under the Oklahoma sun. The competitors are eager to become airborne. The slow climb to altitude gives jumpers plenty of time to mentally prepare for each maneuver.
You don't want to overdo it in your head because you can brain lock it by overdoing it too much.
Brain lock is skydivers' stage fright. To avoid brain lock, most shooters meditate. The mental music soothes the skydivers' nerves. More than a mile above the ground, the plane is maneuvered so that the skydivers can perform their aerial acrobatics.
Ready, set, go! It's showtime! Go!
On the ground, telescopic TV cameras track the half-minute free falls. The video is recorded so that judges can score the contestants on the number and quality of maneuvers. The tapes are replayed so that each contestant can relive his jump. It's the closest the competitors can come to feeling the free fall without leaving the ground.
Every dive is fun for me. We did about 200 practice dives, and some of them were a little bit more fun than others, but every dive is a thrill. You get an adrenaline flow, and you feel high from just skydiving on the ground.
Once the canopy opens, the jumper can relax and enjoy a soft landing. It's a time to pause and reflect on today's jump and to look forward to tomorrow's competition. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in Muskogee.
As of this morning, according to the figures that were provided to us by the Budget Office, we have about a $96.7 million surplus. And I think that it is time, and the caucus agreed with me, that we reconsider that issue and remove the sales tax on prescription drugs, and so we're going to do that. In addition to doing that, we are going to accelerate the effective date. The bill as it presently stands has an effective date of July 1982. We're going to make the effective date January of 1982, and so we will accelerate it by 6 months.
As to be expected, when lawmakers came into the chambers this afternoon, congressional redistricting was the most controversial issue of the day. The Republicans charged it was purely political, with the districts being drawn to give the most benefits to the Democrats.
Let the people know that you had an alternative. You didn't have to do this. This is politics at its worst. It does not serve the people.
But the opposition wasn't purely on the Republican side.
This plan is not fair to the state of Oklahoma. There's not a person in this room can sit down and say this is drawn for the people, because it isn't. I say the same thing about the House plan, the Senate plan. The House plan was the best plan that I think has ever been presented to this House, but the Senate plan was the worst till this come along. There's just no reason in this world that we'll sit out here and try to draw a plan for our delegation in Washington. And that's exactly what we've done.
But the majority of Democrats were in favor of the plan.
I served on the committee, reapportionment, and I've never had a letter from anybody in Oklahoma County or the Panhandle or Eastern Oklahoma or Tulsa or Lawton or anywhere else saying that they were against this plan. Not a one, not a person in the state has wrote a letter. And you'd think that a committee drawing congressional reapportionment, state reapportionment, Senate and the House, well, the people would be more interested in what they are. But they're not. This is just kind of a political hack deal.
The bill passed 62-35, but the Republicans say they'll challenge it in court.
Of the 2,000 Oklahoma City area workers employed by the Postal Service, 1,700 are represented by unions. So if there is widespread support for a walkout tonight, area mail service will be paralyzed tomorrow. Now, to avoid that strike, workers say they want a 5% pay hike, a nearly 3% adjustment for inflation, and a cost of living increase. The Postal Service hasn't even come close to that yet. They claim a strike is illegal and have threatened to fire anyone who walks off the job.
I think that we've got very good caliber employees here, that they certainly have a very difficult job to do, but they're paid a very good wage for doing that job, and that it is against the federal law to strike, and I don't think that our people are going to violate the law. I think they're going to be responsible citizens and that they're going to show up and go to work.
Local Postal Service managers feel confident that their workers won't go off the job midnight tonight. But the leaders of the Oklahoma City Area Postal Workers Union aren't so sure. At union headquarters, plenty of picket signs are ready should the need arise. Earlier this evening, this room was full of enthusiastic union members. American Postal Workers Union President C.J. Guffey says rank-and-file members are nervous but ready.
There's always fear involved. There's always fear involved when you're talking about a strike. But each individual must search themselves, what's best for their family, their own needs, their livelihoods, and in the long run, it may, someone may lose a little pay now, but in the long run, what's best for their families and their livelihood. It's hard to say. It's just an individual option open to everybody.
Postal workers tonight have little to do but wait for a phone call from their national headquarters. It's a call that will determine whether they work or walk tomorrow. Mark O'Neill, Action 4 at the Postal Workers Union headquarters.
These men are keeping an eye on truckers as part of the Road Observation Patrol. They work for major companies and are allowed to use Highway Patrol radar equipment to help them. The pair will monitor the speed of company trucks regardless of the company and how courteous truck drivers are to other motorists on the road. In 6 hours, they will record the actions of as many as 700 trucks. Companies are using the patrols as their only way to see how employees behave when traveling.
Well, a company takes the information and they apply it to that vehicle that was taken from, and the driver gets a violation letter. We just hope the program will more or less keep our people, operating safely out here on the highway. That's what it's all about.
68 on truck.
Patrols say the response from truckers has been favorable for the most part. Company representatives say a trucker given a bad report is allowed to give his or her side of the story to a panel of truckers. It's a concept soon to be used nationwide and bound to make truckers more careful in their driving habits. Ed Stewart, Action 4, Edmond.
Two drownings in motel pools prompted the health department to devote more manpower to pool inspections. No final figures are available yet, but about halfway through the program, 117 pools were closed for safety violations, mostly because of improper barriers or dirty water. Well, most of those problems have been corrected, but health department officials say they will continue to keep a close watch on the situation.
We can't afford to continue with as many people as we have had on it the last week or 10 days, but we will continue to work on problem areas with whatever resources it takes.
At one time, 18 people were out pool inspecting, but Ward says his department can't keep up that pace. So spot checks and cooperation from pool operators and the public will make the job a lot easier. Ted Brown, Action 4.
Have you had
people are human beings too. Our children and women are human beings too. Long live PLO. Long live PLO. Long live Palestine. Long live Lebanon. Long live Lebanon. Down Zionism.
We are against the massacre of thousands of people in Lebanon and Palestine. We are against the slaughter of school youngsters in Nablus, in Hebron, in Jerusalem. This is what we are against. We are not against the Jews.